What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Froglogic Podcast. I'm your host, David Rutherford, former Navy SEAL and CIA contractor. I'm also a world championship performance coach, motivational speaker, and podcast host. Man, I am so grateful that you are tuning in to this episode because this is an episode you absolutely have to hear. This is an episode that is going to hit you with information that is going to shock you. I promise you that. The information today that you're going to hear from my guest, Mike Fullilove from the Deliver Fund about human trafficking is absolutely going to shock you. If you know anything about it, human trafficking is modern day slavery. It is encompassing the entire world in epic proportions. And most especially, it is consuming America and destroying our society, I believe. This is one of the most profound issues that we are facing. I'm telling you, this thing is unbelievable. Before I get into it, I just first want to say thank you to my new sponsor, a company that I am so ecstatic to be working with. Now it is a cutting-edge technology that is going to benefit you in ways you never even dreamed possible. That company is Mymedicalimages Com. Man, I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever hook up with a great tech company, but it's come true. I'm so blessed that they've reached out and that I'm working with them. If you want to know what My Medical Images is, man, it's just, it's as simple as asking yourself a couple questions, right? Think about it. Where do you keep the most important images of your life? I mean, the images that tell your story, that tell your family story. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're saying, well, duh, Rut, in the palm of my hand. All my 19,000 images are on my phone. They're in the cloud. This is the story of my life. Well, I say, fine and dandy, that's epic. That's awesome. I do the same thing. But my next question is, where do you keep the other most important images of your life? Your medical images. Where do you keep your x-rays? Where do you keep your mammograms, your CAT scans, your MRIs, your dental records? Where do you keep all these images? Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, well, what do you mean, Rut? Well, the fact of the matter is, I know where you keep them. They're in your 1999 college CD case, right? Because that's how this whole industry is working. When you go into any type of doctor's office or hospital and you get your medical images, they gave them to you on a CD-ROM. Now, the last time I've checked, my Mac laptop, my MacBook Pro, does not have a CD player. My desktop doesn't have one. Hell, none of the computers in my house. We had to buy an external CD drive to look at all my old pictures, man. The kids crack up about it. But here's the deal. These images are the images that you rely on in order to make sure you're a healthy person. Now, anytime you get an image, you have to request it. You take this antiquated 25-year-old technology and you've got to drive it into your doctor. You've got to drive it into another place, a healthcare provider, a radiologist. Got to take it from here and take it to there. And then you got to give it to them. And then you have to request it back. And maybe you don't get it. And then if you have to request again, it's another $20 to $40, up to $60 in some cases now. Man, it's time to get rid of that headache. Head over to Mymedicalimages.com. My Medical Image is a medical image sharing platform for patients and doctors. If you're a doctor listening, you need to check this out. All right, Mymedicalimages.com was founded on a simple idea that people should be able to control, view, share, and manage a lifetime of medical images just like they do their personal photos. Essentially, it's the Instagram for your medical images. Now, this is crazy because, you know, when you're trying to manage an injury, a massive issue going on with your family or cancer images or back surgery, whatever, think about how difficult that component of. Man, with mymedicalimages.com, you could have all that headache taken away. Store everything in the palm of your hand, on your phone, in the cloud, and be able to not only have those, but share them with doctors to get second opinions, to share them with different healthcare providers at your whim. My Medical Images wants to put the power of your images, your most important medical images, back in your control. Now, here's the deal. Because we're partnering up, I asked them to hook you up a little bit. So today, if you head over to mymedicalimages.com and you sign up for a program, which is normally $29.95 for the year, and that's your entire family, everybody's in there, everybody's images in one place, it's $29.95 for a year subscription. Well, guess what? From now until June 1st, if you type in promo code Froglogic, that's right, promo code Froglogic, you are going to get a 1-year free subscription to mymedicalimages.com. So again, think to yourself, where do you keep the most important images of your life? On your phone, in the palm of your hand. Well, now we want to help you keep the most important medical images for you and your family in the same way. Head over to mymedicalimages.com, enter in promo code when you sign up, Froglogic, and you'll get a 1-year free subscription. Awesome. All right. Okay, back to the Deliver Fund. And today's guest with Mike Fullilove. Now, Mike is a pretty amazing individual. This is a gentleman that was a former Navy SEAL. I never got to work with him, unfortunately. He's on the East Coast. And this guy, let me read you a little bit of his bio right now. Retired Senior Chief SEAL, Michael Fully, for short, Fullilove, has 20 years of experience operating as a Navy SEAL across multiple SEAL teams. Mike Fullilove led cross-functional teams in conducting complex special operations throughout the Middle East. He has worked in a variety of projects and programs in management positions, working across cultures to achieve operational goals. He spent 5 years at a Naval Special Warfare Command, where he was responsible for combining multi-intelligence disciplines with special operations expertise to defeat hostile networks. Over the course of his career, Michael Fullilove also deployed 3 times to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan, and once to Kosovo. In addition to numerous other locations, he is a recipient of a Bronze Star Medal with Valor, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and a number of specific commendation medals. During his deployments, he worked with senior-level foreign government leadership and focused on countering violent extremist organizations, human and physical infrastructure development for operational purposes, and personnel recovery. Following retirement, Mr. Fullilove provided operational consultant service to military, government, and faith-based clients. Now, Mike Fullilove and his team over at the Deliver Fund are absolutely committed to getting bad guys off the streets. I'm telling you, man, these people are just incredibly dedicated towards everything that they're doing, man. I had the incredible fortune last time when I was with the TNQ podcast to interview Nic McKinley, the founder of Deliver Fund. And this guy, former Air Force Special Operations, CIA and they are out on the front lines really hunting down the problem, which is the traffickers themselves. Now, if you're not familiar with how extensive this problem is, let me give you a couple statistics off their website, which is deliverfund.org, all right? Every 2.5 hours, a child is taken by human trafficking. Every 2.5 hours. There are 100,000 to 150,000 victims are held as commercial sex slaves in the U.S. alone. 100,000 to 150,000 sex slaves in the U.S. alone. Every trafficked child is purchased for sex 5.4 times a day. Let me say that again, just so it sinks in. Every trafficked child is purchased for sex 5.4 times a day. Now, imagine if this happened to your family. Imagine if this happened to one of your best friend's children. Imagine if this happened to anybody you know or care about, because they are out there every single day hunting down children and girls and young girls and women and boys and young boys to traffic in the United States. This is a massive problem we are facing, and we need to bring more attention to organizations like Deliver Fund and to support gentlemen like Mike Fullilove. please do yourself a favor, pay attention, go over to deliverfund.org, see what they're doing, and donate to them, help them, because what these intelligence specialists, these former special operators do is they, through their proprietary technology, they are able to dig in to everything that's available online and every other place, and put together these incredible intel packages that then they turn over to law enforcement, who take traffickers off the streets. This is absolutely phenomenal. These are the people that deserve our attention. These are the people that are making a difference every single day. All right, you are going to love this one. It's going to be hard to hear and hard to accept that this is the reality of our country right now, but I'm sorry, you have to hear this information. So what do you say? Let's bring Mike on and stand by. My brother. Listen, man, I usually come out of the gates on every show, other than some of the recent ones I've had about everything we've been going through. But, you know, I am always motivated in a way that really, I hope it becomes infectious to other people. Although this time I am every bit as motivated, and perhaps more motivated, since the last time I had the incredible opportunity of working with Deliver Fund when we were able to interview Nic, one of the founders of Deliver Fund, on the Team Never Quit podcast. And it was one of the most impactful shows I've ever been a part of in my life. And so to be able to get now, no hit to Nic and his Air Force background and his agency stuff, but to have now you and a team guy, no, I'm kidding. It's really just to bring you guys back on. This is so powerful, and I can't thank you enough, Mike.
Well, we won't hold Nick's poor choices of his youth against him. He seems to have atoned for those sins at this point.
I just gotta know. Do you and Jeremy hammer the snot out of him on a regular basis?
Oh, bro, you know how it goes in our community. Nic is very much in the same thing. So yeah, there is constant back and forth, because it's no secret that some of our brethren have made some missteps that have made the news. And,
oh God!
So yeah, Nic takes every opportunity he can to hit Jeremy and I up with that, and then certainly we throw it right back at him. So it's a beautiful dynamic.
What I love is, and what makes me happier than anything on this planet, is when, people such as yourselves don't put away that intrinsic, really, core drive to serve, right? They don't put it up because they got to take care of their families, or they got to do whatever, they're seeking the money or whatever. They're speaking, writing books and trying to, sell their stories or whatever, but they actually put that service back into use, and they continue to help make the world a better place. And that's what you guys are doing every single day of your lives, man. And God bless you for it, man.
Well, I appreciate it. Right? I really do. I say this, and I hope it doesn't come across as trite, but it is absolutely an honor to still be able to continue to serve. And we can get into it a little bit later, kind of my story and all that.
Yeah.
But, that desire to serve is absolutely one of those motivating drivers for me personally. And frankly, for just about every single person in the organization as well.
I bet. How can it not be, right? It's not like you're out there working on some defense contract and not to hit contractors. I spent a god awful lot of time as a contractor, but this is really critical, because the end user is not, people waging war against each other in foreign lands on a battlefield. The end user, the powers that be, is not the military industrial complex, none of that. This is children and women, and little boys and young men being trafficked and sold into slavery, into bondage. And no human being should ever have to experience that in the world. And so let's jump into this. Can you just paint, take that 40,000 foot level and just paint an image for everybody tuning in on what the size and scope and spectrum from a global down to America is right now?
Absolutely. So just raw numbers globally, we're looking at just under 25 million people.
What?
Across all the different forms of trafficking. So that's including, the sex trafficking of minors, sex trafficking of adults, but it also includes all the forced labor, that enters into our supply chains. So yeah.
And that's the Uyghurs or whatever in China. That's the forced labor from Thailand into the Middle East. That's Filipinos.
Yeah. So it's, the Burmese guy who goes to Thailand for a better life and gets caught up on a shrimp fishing vessel. But then there's also the other part. I mean, let's look at North Korea. I mean, the state-sponsored forced labor, right?
Yes.
I mean, that is probably one of the largest forced labor camps. I mean, it's virtually a nation of forced labor.
Right. Several millions of people. Yeah.
Well.
Wow. Okay. So it's and correct me if I'm wrong. And what I'd seen in a couple of the stuff that I watched is that it doesn't always even include these massive crime syndicates. So, it's not just the Yakuza or the cartels or the Russian mafia or anything like that. I mean, this is just like, anybody can get into this because it's so profitable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about, okay, let's just compare it real quickly to drugs, right? Somebody takes and they sell, pick your quantity, a kilo of Coke. Well, that kilo of Coke is sold. It's gone, right? That dealer now has to go get more Coke and sell another kilo of Coke. The sad reality is with a human, you can sell that thing over and over and over and over and over. And I will just tell you the anecdotes and some of the more horrendous stories, even here in the United States. You're talking about being sold 10 times a day, 6 to 7 times a week, which is, in all honesty, that is rape. I mean, so you're talking about people who are being raped 70 times a week, potentially. I mean, that is the industrialization of rape. And I know that sounds harsh. It sounds crass, but
it's the truth.
It's exactly
wholeheartedly. It's the truth. Man. So after the madness of last week or 2 weeks ago on the Capitol, all that, I've been leading up, I was like, man, I need more education on revolutionary, aspects of societies. And so I went back and rewatched Ken Burns' documentary on the Civil War, which is, one of my favorites of all time. And it just immediately starts into the cause and what it was about in terms of human slavery. And when you think about that, how these people would be sold 5-6 times, families torn apart, they changed their wedding vows in order to maintain. But to recognize that as a commodity and is really just, when you think about it, in terms of the psychological effects of the individual who wants to do that, I mean, you're talking about the darkest evil that exists on the planet, man.
I think that you can't doubt. I mean, if you were to do a psychological profile, that there is no small percentage of psychopathy in the human trafficking realm.
Okay.
As far as those who actually do the human trafficking, not everybody's going to be a psychopath, but there's got to be a fair percentage that is in fact popping hot on the PCLR.
Right.
I mean, when you look at the behaviors, it's all antisocial. I mean, there's a lot of self-aggrandizement. So there's a lot of stuff.
All right. So take us domestically.
Yeah.
Take us domestically, because when we move into the space where we take an individual a case and you walk us through that. And I know there's an innumerable amount of situations, but just to kind of give a better idea for the listeners, how it happens in the process, we'll talk into more of the psychology of the individual and how you guys profile, because you guys target the trafficker, not necessarily the trafficked, which is, in my opinion, that's the greatest solution there is by far. Remove the assholes, so you can fix the problem, man. So help us understand the domestic problem.
So the domestic problem, okay? There's a lot of numbers you're going to hear out there. And frankly, a lot of them are rather spurious.
Really?
Yeah. And a lot of it just has to do with, it's really hard to quantify this particular crime. I mean, it's not something, it's not something that is easily detected by a lot of law enforcement agencies. You've got victims who don't come forward because of various reasons, whether it's fear, whether it's shame, whether it's, this is my new norm and I've adapted to it. So all that being said, what I will tell you is I start looking at the peer-reviewed studies. And one of the studies, and this is going to scare the piss out of you.
Oh God, no.
Is 100,000 victims of domestic minor sex trafficking in the US. Okay. So to put that in perspective, okay, that's 2,000 children in every state of the union on an evenly spread histogram. To dial it down a little further, you're talking 4 to 5 elementary schools in every state of the union. Okay.
4 to 5 full elementary schools in every state are being trafficked a day?
If over the course of any given year, if it was an evenly spread histogram, right? Now it's not. You're going to have pockets where there's more in good areas there aren't, but that's 100,000. Okay. Now that sounds pretty atrocious. However, and here's the comma, it doesn't take into account all the adult victims of sex trafficking in the US. It doesn't take into account the victims of traditional labor trafficking in the United States. So the scale of the problem is actually much greater than just 100,000 people in the US.
Why don't they put the numbers together? Why don't they have it? First off, let me back up. Who controls the database and how do they do it?
That'd be wonderful if there was a national database.
Are you kidding me?
There is no national true human database. So you've got various organizations, but some of them are based on, they get their numbers strictly from tips from the community or from reports from victims, that sort of thing. But there is no actual hardcore centralized database for human trafficking in the United States from any government agency. There's a whole bunch of different stuff out there, but our government, by and large, is still a very siloed type of entity.
Right. That makes sense. That's something I can understand.
So they're focused on their piece of pie. They're focused on their pieces of the pie, and never the two really talk because they've got their own missions. They don't really care about what other stuff's going on.
Well, that's what blew me away. And I watched one interview with Nic when he was talking about how he was overseas in Lashkar, a very horrific place to be in any particular way. I just spent a little bit of time there, but he gets this intel and there's nothing to do with it. And nobody wants to take possession of it. It's always like, no, you take it, or no, we don't want to do with this because we're focused on this. And it seems like that's happening domestically too.
To a degree it is. I've gotten a really good appreciation for law enforcement since.
I bet.
Okay. And I say this in a completely not disparaging manner, but a lot of our law enforcement folks are really operating in almost kind of a pre-9/11 type of model for the special operations forces and intel folks.
Yep.
And some of that's just because that's the way business has been done. Some of that is honestly just a lack of resources. They aren't resourced, whether that's human capital, whether that's material, whether that's money for training, they just aren't resourced. So that's one of the problems is a lot of folks don't understand the problem. They don't see it as a problem. They're operating under this is prostitution. This is a vice type of crime as opposed to human trafficking because of all those aforementioned factors.
Wow.
That being said, there is movement. There are these multi-state operations. They're coordinated by different federal agencies.
Well, we just saw a big one a couple days ago, and then who had that huge one in the end of the spring? Right, there was 100
commercials, I think.
Yeah, man, that was 149 kids. I mean, we're seeing them pop up at more with federal agencies.
But what we got to be careful here, Dave, is how do we truly qualify it? Because the truth is, human trafficking is becoming a much more of a buzzword. So you've got people going, oh, well, if we do this, we can get money or resources for doing these human trafficking ops. We can get good press. But the fact is, a lot of times it's not human trafficking. Sometimes, they'll rescue these kids and it's a victim where there was a non-custodial parental abduction.
Okay.
But it gets wrapped up into the human trafficking thing. Well, frankly, that confuses the general citizenry, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, when in fact it wasn't actually addressing the human trafficking problem.
So they're learning how to politicize it for political wins.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
We'd be naive to think that doesn't take place.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And you know what? It's not all malfeasance. Some of it is legitimately, you know what? The local mayor, the local councilman, they may not truly know the definition of human trafficking. They're, oh, okay, well, this is that, and therefore we'll qualify it as such.
Well, let's do that. Let's start right now
Yeah.
with a definition of human trafficking. And then from there, Mike, why don't we go into where you describe the process, right? That you guys see, or a similar, an amalgamation of all the different types of things you've seen. I know that's not a good way. Maybe you could give us one or two, but in my mind, it's like, you see, the nefarious character in the mall, and he's waiting, he's watching teenage girls go in, and, he goes up and he's slipping, he wants to, hey, have you ever had some weed? And then they go party and he roofies them and then they disappear. I mean, that's everybody has this, this picture in their head, but it's much more sophisticated now than ever before. So maybe you could define it and then take us through it.
So, the definition we work under is from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, and it's been subsequently reauthorized. For the general audience, human trafficking is the forcing somebody to conduct some sort of labor, whether that's sex or other labor, under the threat of force, fraud, or coercion. And that person is not allowed to keep the proceeds for which they did the work. That's a very basic definition for the audience. So if somebody's doing work and they're doing it under the threat of force, fraud, or coercion, and they can't keep their money, that is human trafficking. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be across borders. Even intra-US, it can be done within a city. Okay. That is human trafficking. Just to go back to the numbers real briefly.
Yeah.
We talked about 100,000 domestic minor sex trafficking victims. So, other folks talk about, well, what about all this stuff coming in from overseas? Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is, those numbers are only about 17,500.
It's smaller. It's much smaller.
Yeah. So now you've got a bunch of human smuggling.
Right.
That's voluntary activity. The person is willingly utilizing that. So
is it still considered smuggling if you then put product on the mule?
So that would be a different type of trafficking, though, right?
Okay.
At that point, you're basically overlaying a drug trafficking with a human smuggling operation.
Okay.
Now, that being said, there's plenty of people who get smuggled into the U.S. who are then at much greater risk of being trafficked once they're here, because they don't have documents, they don't have a support network, all of that. They're much more easily exploited.
Interesting. Okay.
Anyway, I digress.
Well, you can digress all damn day on this show, brother, because every time you do that, we get hit with a piece of information or intel that is staggering and is literally like you'll say something and I don't know what to do. Right. We live in this space where, we see these advancements in our lives, and we see, right, that we're rooted in an evolutionary sophistication that is projecting or whatever powers that be want to project us into this. Oh, we don't exist within any of this particular thing anymore. It's above us, in these elites. But on the ground floor, it's real, and it's happening in front of our faces in every single state.
Yes.
That's shocking to me. And it's not just poor kids too. It's everybody.
Right. I mean, it does. It is literally everything from Florida to Alaska, from Hawaii to New York and Maine.
Wow.
I mean, there's not a single state that it doesn't touch.
Wow.
So taking that definition, when you start looking at that, there's a lot on the internet, just in the commercial sex industry. Commercial sex advertisements, everybody's familiar with Backpage, how they shut it down. A funny story, we actually took over Backpage's headquarters because right?
That was my favorite thing in the whole world, bro. That was my favorite part of your story, is that you actually gave him a double, a double FU.
To the victor, the spoils.
Amen.
But anyway, so what the effect of that was, yes, that definitely disrupted the market. But I will tell you, it only disrupted it for about 3 weeks, because we were watching the activity. We saw a dip in the activity, and within 3 weeks, it was back up to pre-shutdown levels. It had just been disaggregated.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so now
explain disaggregation for everybody.
Yeah. So instead of being on Backpage.com, which was like the 800-pound gorilla, it's now on about 33 different sites, all of which deliver fundus monitoring and tracking and all of that. And what we do is actually we kind of utilize that as a start point for a lot of our commercial sex exploitation the stuff we do with law enforcement.
Right.
And really, it's all about data, Dave.
It is all data, right?
We live in a world where, everything is out there, and people they've freely given data all over the place. It is available, and so it's just a matter of being able to find it and then start making those links,
those connections. Yeah, absolutely. That's for me is like when you listen to some of the analysts that you guys have employed now, and I remember the first time I deployed over working with the agency, and it's like, all right, analysts, whatever, and then you see these people work and you're like, my God, these are the people that are making it all happen. These are the people that are pulling together these millions of pieces of information and consolidating in a way that we can make it actionable. And without that, we're all we are is swimming in this polluted sea of data that nobody can make rhyme or reason out of. And these people
analysts are critical.
Right.
Absolutely critical. I mean, a quick anecdote. I remember in 2009 to 2010, I was still active duty.
Right.
We were actually in Iraq at the time, and I was working for SA2 at the time, and we were doing a lot of the targeting. Well, somebody was like, hey, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Resources. And they kept trying to give me more collectors. And I'm like, I don't want more collectors. That's the last thing I need. What I need are more analysts. The data is out there. I need people who can process it, find the links, and turn it into an actionable product. And you know what? That same paradigm exists here across
right now
in the human trafficking realm.
Wow.
The data's out there. It's just a matter of having the right methodology to be able to go out and find it.
Okay. Well, all right, let's take a step back. And if you could walk us through, a story that from the inception where the tracker is monitoring, he sees a target, and then the whole process of introduction, and then the manipulation, and then ultimately the capture.
Okay, yeah. So real broadly for the listeners, just before I get into the specifics, this is not it's not like, hey, we're going to grab somebody off the street type thing.
Yeah.
Does that happen? Absolutely. But it's an infinitesimally small percentage. It is much, much more insidious than that. So a pretty good example is a story of a teenage boy who is on a gaming platform, a common gaming platform, that any teenage boy is probably on. And he's going back and forth. He's been playing, and he thinks he's playing with other kids. And somebody starts contacting him in the chat feature of that game. Totally normal, But this particular person spent 18 months grooming.
18
months, a full year and a half.
That's longer than most sources, man.
Yes. And you hit, that's a perfect analogy. It is source operations 101, just utilized against vulnerable people.
Right. The most vulnerable. Most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this particular case spent 18 months getting the kid, kind of turning him against the parents, that sort of stuff. Finally convinced him to come out and meet, and got him off the game onto another communication platform, and then met. Scooped him up, took the phone, threw it out the window, took him across state lines.
Wow.
And parents are like, what the hell? law enforcement, like, we got nothing, we want to look at the phone, but here it is on the side of the road. Now, just by happenstance, somebody reached out to Deliver Fund, and, we had an incredible analyst work on it and was literally able to identify who the trafficker was. And through a bunch of our different methodologies and tactics, was able to identify where that person resided and develop kind of a pattern of life and all of that.
Wow.
And was able to provide the law enforcement where that person was, as a start point. And federal law enforcement was able to get there and recover the boy. Now, that's a great win.
That's like the be all. That's like the perfect scenario, right?
If you can't prevent it, that's a wonderful scenario, right?
Yeah.
Here's the scary part. That kid was going to be moved out of that location in 8 hours. He was supposed to be moved. So, I mean, it is literally just, by the grace of God, if you will, that everything lined up and law enforcement was able to get there.
Right.
And here's the scary part. The parents of that boy were doing everything that you would think was right? Phones are downstairs in a common location. You can monitor the phones. You can do all this, all of that, everything that you would think was doing, and it still happened.
Wow.
And why? Because they take their time. 18 months. I mean, most people aren't going to.
They're not that patient.
18 months, right?
Right.
I mean, 18 months, you think you've developed a true friend.
Absolutely. As a child, it's like 3 months. Yeah.
Right. You don't have the executive capacity to really focus on that stuff.
Right.
So I give that case only as a model because that is often how it happens. Okay. So the traffickers will take their time to identify the vulnerabilities of their chosen target. And they will take their time to spend identifying it. And then they will take their time to become friends and very, very slowly turn it into something else.
What are the vulnerabilities? What is it? If you're a trafficker, you're looking across the internet, you're in these gaming platforms, you're on social media. What are you looking for? Are you looking for telltale signs of are you looking for economic status? Are you looking for detachment issues within, no photos with parents, or, certain rebelliousness in physical appearance or music or postings? Are you reading what they're writing on everybody's stuff? I mean, how deep does it go?
All of the above.
Oh God, I knew you were going to say that.
The sad part is there's no single demographic of a victim, and there's no single demographic of a trafficker.
Wow.
So, you've got to, say a 13-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl who's posting on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Traffickers are monitoring that. And if they see stuff that's like, hey, you know what? She's having problems with her parents. Well, guess what? I'm so, teenage girls. My parents wouldn't buy me the latest and greatest iPhone. Well, hey, guess what, honey? You know what? That's so messed up. I'll buy your iPhone for you.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's just
that easy.
That hook is set at that point, right? Now it's just a matter of reeling them in over time, getting to know them better, identifying further vulnerabilities, and then exploiting those vulnerabilities. And then it can be as simple as, you know what? Hey, if you really love me, because lots of times this is the kind of a Romeo method is what it's known as.
Right.
The boyfriend, girlfriend, I'll fix all your problems. And then if you really love me, you'll do this for me.
Or honeypot if you're a politician or an operative working overseas, right? Yeah, same thing, right?
But then once they do that for you, well, now it becomes easier to do that next thing.
Yeah.
And then that next thing and the next thing. And pretty soon, you've basically got somebody, oh, well, if you don't do it, guess what? I'm going to show these photos that I've got of you all over the place, And in the course of all this, they're continuing to work that divide, right? Oh yeah, they don't care about you. They don't do this. You're right. You don't need them. And then there's a movement component to it, isolation, right?
Oh, it's Taliban 101, right?
Yeah.
It's Al Qaeda 101. You isolate these young kids, you take them out of Baluchistan or whatever, you put them in a madrasa for 5 years, you indoctrinate them under this heavy pretense of radical ideologies. And next thing you know, you've got a suicide bomber. You've got 25,000 suicide bombers in Pakistan at any 1 minute, right? I mean, It's the same principle psychologically.
Same principle, but the only thing is here, there can be absolutely no terrorist or freedom fighter debate. that debate does not exist in this realm.
Right.
This, I mean, you either are human trafficking or you are not. I mean, there is no like, hey, I'm doing this for the greater good of whatever cause, right? No, it's all about the money.
So let me ask you this in terms of that. Once the recruitment's done, and then it moves into that next phase where you're going to start earning revenue on this individual. Can you walk us through kind of the economics that you guys have seen that drive those, kind of and I don't want you to expose too much of what you know about it, for obvious reasons, but if you can kind of, tell the listeners, all right, this is the motivation, right? This is the motivation, and this is how it pays off.
Yeah. So the motivation, quite simply, is money. That is all it is about. It's all about the money.
There's no sensation of dominance or pedophilia. I one time talked to a psychologist who, right out of med school, they had to go do an intern, and for their intern, they worked in a prisons. They would go to prisons to interview pedophiles to try and see if there was any way to rehabilitate a pedophilic mindset, right? Could you unprogram those things? And, this guy found that, 90+% of them, there was no way to recondition them where pedophilia wasn't a part of their processing.
Right. So in this case, the professionals, just like with drugs, they don't do their own drugs. The professionals will not partake of their own product.
Okay.
Right. Now you're going to have some that do, and okay, those are them. But in general, the real professionals won't partake of their product.
Okay.
And so once they get them in there, they'll move them around because, frankly, movement keeps them ahead of law enforcement, because law enforcement is jurisdictionally bound. That's how our system is set up.
Mm-hmm.
So they get in, they're there for a few days, they can get out before law enforcement typically can really react and get after them. So that continued movement keeps people continually off balance, right? It also gets you to a new area, a new customer base, so that you can make more money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just take rough numbers, right? Say we'll do, and there's a range of advertising, but let's call it $300 for an hour visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these girls end up having a quota. It may be, hey, you got to make me $1,500 a day. Well, that lets you know that they've got to succumb to rape 5 times a day, every day, right? But let's just do some rough math, and let's say that there's $2,000 a day,
Mm-hmm.
or $1,800 a day, right? Over the course of 10 days, you're at $18,000. That's $180,000 over 100 days.
Wow.
$360,000 at 200 days. So we're looking at just over $500,000 off of one person at 300 days. Now that presumes they get 65 days off a year,
Right.
which they don't.
They don't.
No, they don't. You might have some of that time going in to travel, that sort of thing, but you're talking over $500,000 basically for 300 days. How would you like to have made that money contracting?
It's unconscionable. I mean, it's insane. Well, and I think, people are, like, do they hit, are you seeing that these children, does their value denigrate? At some point, are they mentally broken, emotionally broken to where they're no longer useful and they're just thrown away or killed?
There is that component. Yes. That is one of the saddest components of this, is the long-lasting effects of the treatment. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking multiple years into decades of therapy and services to recover from that. I will tell you, we are fortunate to Deliver Fund. We're not just a bunch of gun monkeys that are going out and doing this. We actually have former victims who we call thrivers on our staff.
Wow.
And so that way they can inform us how we ought to approach certain things. I mean, that perspective is incredible. I mean,
you can only get that in one place. It just does. It only exists within the victims.
Yeah.
Right?
You can't replicate that through training or experience or anything else.
Do you find that
I hear the stories. I've heard our thrivers stories multiple times, and it still brings tears to my eyes. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, the absolute depravity and cruelty that can exist in the humankind.
All right, let's go back to the aspect of the finance. Do traffickers get rid of product? Do they sell them to hubs where there's a distribution center, if you will? Like they'll sell them to a place where you have one localized syndicate that has the facilities for the transactions. Then they can sell drugs out of there. They can run other things, or is it so transitory because you always have to keep it moving?
So I have not seen a centralized hub for that sort. It's not like there's a slave market where people go to buy and sell.
I mean, I think everybody has these misconceptions that it's like a massage parlor, right? There's the local massage parlor. You go in and, you go and you pay for the massage, but you pay for the others in cash or whatever. And that's the way it's functioning. So there's some type of, organization to the deliverable, right? But in this case, they're just wearing these children or kids or adults out until they're worthless. Is that what you see mostly?
So what happens lots of times, outside of the massage parlor industry, which has its own set of different kind of operating principles, you'll see a trafficker with 4 or 5 victims. And when one of them starts to not produce or becomes too big of a pain in the ass to them, they'll basically sell them off to another trafficker. They'll work a deal. Hey, yeah, I'll sell her for $2,000. That other trafficker then buys her, and then she has to work for him. Now that could have gone from a Romeo pimp, and maybe he's selling her to what's known as a guerrilla pimp, who's now more inclined to put some marks on her to get her to work.
Right. And listen, let me just hop in real quick, Mike. If you're listening right now, and you guys, is anybody's feeling as if we've become desensitized to this, I can 100% assure you that Michael and every single person at Deliver Fund, these people care, and they care to the deepest way that humanity. Think about it as you're listening to Mike tell these stories and his information. I want you to think about that. He has to expose himself to this day in and day in, then go back to his own family and process this information. So the emotional fortitude that these people have for getting in is a very profound thing. So please don't misinterpret the terminology. Don't misinterpret how we're describing these things. When you look at it from a systems perspective, or you look at it from an intelligence perspective, it makes it more efficient when you have terminology that keeps it in more of a operations perspective. And where we come from in terms of our background, it's just kind of the lingo. It's the language we use. So please don't pass judgment on what you're hearing. Man, this man is the real deal. Everybody at Deliver Fund, they care deeply. That's why they do it. Okay. I'm sorry, Mike. I just wanted to interject that.
No, I appreciate that. The truth is, I mean, all of us at Deliver Fund who are doing this daily, we do end up compartmentalizing. You have to compartmentalize, and you have to be able to, at least to some degree, turn it off when you go into family life.
Well, that's an interesting question. Let's take a little jaunt down this rabbit hole here, because I remember when we did one with Tim Ballard too, at Operation Underground Rescue, and they're doing a lot of international work. As you guys are really focused in domestic and in a different perspective too, very different organizations, all in the same business. Tim was telling me, he gets guys all the time, they volunteer. Oh, I want to go, I want to go take down these badasses. And I was like, Tim, how long is that? How long are these guys capable of doing that? And he said, on average, we lose guys after the second or third op, because they just can't. You can't go into a place in Colombia and see a 2-year-old little girl on a bed bleeding vaginally, and some 60-year-old German guy, has just spent a week raping this child, 10 times a day, and not have that affect you. So can you personalize this a little bit and maybe share, a little bit of background in terms of, how you got into teams and then the transition into this? Because the one thing I really want people to understand is, everybody's always like, why do you do this, man? Why would you ever want to expose yourself on a long-term way to this? And maybe you could just share your story, Mike.
Yeah. So to get into my story, I grew up out as a little surfer kid out in California. That being said, I didn't necessarily have all the structure that maybe I should have had in the world. And I was fortunate in that my grandparents lived in Coronado. So I went down to visit my grandparents, and, you go down the Strand, and they happened to live in Coronado Cays at the time. Well, when you're driving down the Strand and you see these guys climbing over the cargo net, right? To an 8-year-old boy, that is Shangri-La. I mean, you are just, oh my God, that's so much cool. I want to do that. Well, so that was kind of my grandparents sent me stuff, and I just kind of, I was hooked from like 8 years old. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I go through, cool. Kind of my turbulent years of teenagedom, and it is truly lucky that I chose that path, because it could have been a totally different story. Like Fullilove. So I, a funny story. My dad wanted me to go to the academy, Naval Academy, this, that, or the other. And what he got instead was, when he came home from work one day, the recruiter was sitting on the couch.
Same with me, man. I dropped out, came home, and was like, "Here, Pop, sign here."
Yeah. I'm like, "This is what I'm doing." Whoa, no. Begrudgingly, he signed the papers, and clearly I made it through SEAL training. And I went to be a corpsman because, they ask you what you want to do. I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll do this medic thing because, worst case, it doesn't work out. At least I've got something I can fall back on.
Amen. When'd you go through 18 Delta?
So I went through in the mid 90s when it was about a year before it closed in San Antonio.
Okay. So all right. That's what I thought. Cause I was in class 4 in Bragg, and I remember hearing all the stories about you guys in San Antonio. I'm like, why did it change? And and I got to go through my refresher back there with me and JD Smith, man, went through back then, and holy God, that was fun. That was a good time.
Yeah, it was hedonism. That being said, it was also, as you well know, a lot of work.
God, all of AP in a week.
Yeah, exactly. So then I went to the teams, and it kind of struck me initially when I checked into SEAL Team 4. Like, I go to the intel department, and I see maps, but like I'm expecting like this, I don't know, like CIA type of thing, It's like full-blown intel agency inside the team, and it wasn't there. It was like one officer and 2 intel specialists, and they handed out maps and charts
and a camera. Here's your camera.
Yeah, I'm like, good heavens, okay. But I'm new. I don't know anything. So, but that was in fact the case at that time. So I go through, and back in about 2007 to 2012, I joined SA2 when they kind of stood up that whole thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, okay, this is what I thought our intel department was going to be, right? Mm-hmm. Operationalizing the stuff, doing all this stuff. So I got into doing that. I went through that whole entire program, had the fortune of having an incredible troops,
right.
And loved the work, saw that it was super effective.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just kind of the whack-a-mole. It was like, hey, look, we can attack a network. And I just loved that aspect of it.
Well, think about what it did. Think about it did for us operationally, man. I remember when my only trip in a team's over was in the summer of 2002, right? We went to Afghanistan, and I was the intel rep for the platoon, obviously. And then I go in there and I walk into, the talk, and I'm like, all right, who do I talk to? What do we do? How do we start building profile? And they're like, what do you mean, man? And like, nobody, the agency doesn't talk to us. They don't give us any intel. They don't do anything. And I'm like, well, how are we supposed to know what we do? And like, we're just kind of waiting for our orders. And I remember I go over to the Aussies had come in their lorries and stuff. And I meet, and they look like they had been getting after it. Right. And I beeline over. I'm like, hey, how are you guys getting your intel? What are you doing? They're like, what do you mean, mate? We're going out and we're picking a fight. What do you mean? And I was just like, that's what you have to do. We need to be more like, and I immediately go over to SF, and the SF guys were like, no, we're creating our own intel because nobody's sharing, nobody's doing anything. And it blew me away that it took us that long to get there, but thank God we did. And you guys got to really develop, I think, one of the best programs in all of special operations.
And it was a lot of fun. I mean, I categorize that as the best 25% of my career.
Yeah.
I really do. It was awesome. So 2012 comes around, and I'd only been at home about 15 months out of those 5 years, which in some cases for a family is really not sustainable. And my projection was, yeah, hey, we can keep you home for a year, and then you're going to go do a year unaccompanied. I'm like, holy crap! You got to be kidding me. I mean,
yeah.
And I had a young son at the time. I'm like, you know what? I love this work, but my legacy's got to be elsewhere. And so I retired, and I actually went in and started doing some contracting for the government as well. And initially I loved it. I mean, you're making really good money and you're not even in charge of pencils. I mean,
Exactly.
it's like being an officer on a platoon or something. You know what I mean?
I love that.
You don't get any better than that.
I love it.
But I have a kind of restless mind, Dave, and I soon got bored just doing what we're doing. So
yeah,
I can't lay claim to always making the best decisions in life. And my solution to boredom was to go to grad school.
Good for you. That must have been awesome in your late 30s, early 40s, going to grad school.
So, but I don't recommend that as a solution to boredom for the general populace.
Yeah. Or us. We're not exactly the general populace. So yeah.
So I similar to you, I go to Penn State, right?
Yeah, my brother.
So we are.
Penn State.
But I decided to go, I go back to the whole wanting to do something better for humanity as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time I'm like, well, let me look into renewable energy and sustainability. So that's what I went to grad school for. And through that, I was like, okay, there's some things in the renewable energy sphere I kind of like, the sciencey, nerdy type stuff that I dig. Mm-hmm. But there was a course that I took that really started looking at supply chains. And that's where I first came in contact with human trafficking. And it was through labor trafficking and supply chains of these big multinational corporations.
Right.
And it kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, holy smokes, this is not right. You know what I mean? So that led me to just start doing a little bit more research on my own, and looking at human trafficking. And I Google it, and all these organizations come up. Hey, former SEALs and SF going over, kicking in doors, rescuing kids. I'm like, wow, that is sexy as hell.
Yeah.
Involved, right?
Yep.
Get your blood pumping. You're like, yes, that's the mission I've been wanting. This is gonna, really fulfill me, and I get to do something good for the world.
Yeah, man.
In the course of that, I happened to come across Deliver Fund, and pardon me, what they were talking about was a little bit different. And I immediately recognized, kind of reading through the lines, I'm like, this sounds a lot like what I was doing before I had retired. And I'll tell you, I retired with some trepidation because I'm like, I love what I'm doing, and I just know there's no application for it here.
Other than in the one spot, right? You go and you get on full time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I got to close that chapter. Well, Deliver One, I'm like, this is what I know, And so, I reached out to him. I actually just reached out to Jeremy, and I didn't know Jeremy from anybody. I'm just like, hey, dude, here's who I am, a little bit about me. Let me know how I can help. Well, I got on with Nic, several months later, and he was like, yeah, hey, this, that, or the other, here's what we're looking for. I'm like, well, I don't necessarily have expertise in this. I know how to manage it, but it wasn't my strength area or my focus area. So let me research this. I'll reach back out to you, when I get proficient at it. And I figure, 6-9 months later, I'll reach back out. Well, then I get an email going, hey, are you still interested in the director of operations position? And I'm like, well, of course I'm still interested in the director of operations position. So basically, I guess I pulled the wool over people's eyes enough that I ended up getting hired into the position. And I'll tell you what, it has just been awesome.
Let me ask you a personal question if I can, and you don't have to answer it. Was your family worried, nervous? So the
short answer is yes.
Yeah.
There was some consternation. I don't want to get too much into it, but I have a wife who works in a sphere where this could have impacted it, and so there was some trepidation. Um, but so that's kind of like the professional component of leading me there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens that at the same time, and I've told this story to somebody else. My son was like in second grade, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, we're having to talk about bullying."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Son, here's the deal, bud. We stand up to bullies. No matter what, we stand up to them. Whether you're being bullied or you see somebody else being bullied, you stand up, you do the right thing. You choose that hard right over the easy wrong every time." And like any little kid, he's like, "Well, what if I get hurt? What if I do, and hey, it's okay. Mom and I'll take care of it, this, that, or the other." And I go to bed that night feeling like, yeah, you made an impact. You're dad of the year.
Dun, dun, dun.
I woke up the next morning, looked in the mirror to get ready to go to my contracting job, and I go, "You are the biggest effing hypocrite on the face of the planet."
Oh my
Because
God.
here you are, you're just given this whole line of what you're supposed to do to your son. And literally, you have a skill set that you can apply to this very problem. And you're not doing it. So the convergence kind of that professional interest, looking at it, and just my son hitting me, that's really what kind of propelled me into it.
Wow. Unbelievable. So you wake up and you see yourself in the mirror and you're like, "Oh my God, I suck. I'm full of it."
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's probably the only epiphany I've had in my entire life.
Wow.
And it really was. It was just a matter of, you can't sit here and talk the talk to your son, because your son's going to watch you. Kids, they watch what you do, and they'll
Everything.
do not so much do what you say. They only do what you say when you're watching.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, yeah, let me see what I can do. And so that's really kind of what propelled me.
When you show up and you're first, because there's first day jobs, right? And then there's first day jobs like day one of buds, right? Like day one overseas on your first combat deployment, all these day one jobs. That's what this is. On your day one job, what was it like moving into an organization? Because obviously by that time you had spoken at length to everybody, and obviously they're trying to prepare you mentally, as much as you can be. "Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I understand what and then there's day one job. Can you kind of walk us through the first month or so of adapting there?
Yeah. So virtually on almost day one, Nic starts getting me into it. And, I start having to try to map out this network. And, you're trying to learn the job. You're trying to learn a whole new technology system. All the typical anxiety and jitters that go into a first day. Anyway, and I want to say I spent about 20 hours over the course of a day and a half, really kind of pulling all the strings, matching it all together, filled with self-doubt, honestly, because I'm like, this is not matching up with what I'm picturing. I'm picturing that there's got to be a dude at the center of all of this stuff. And finally, Nic's like, "You've already found the trafficker. It was a female."
Oh, wow.
And that was like that's just that's the facepalm moment. It's like, oh my God. I mean, on so many different levels, because yes, there are a lot of females that are into the trafficking as well.
And that's what blew me away, man. When I started, when you on some of your videos, and the more you get in this, you realize that, hey, there is a massive component. Where I was really in shock? There's a great couple documentaries about the NXIVM organization, that cult, the sex cult. And you hear it in the news and you're like, "Oh, what's that? Bunch of weirdos." But you get into that, and that's what this was. It was a trafficking operation with a heavy indoctrination plan for mind altering, realities. And so it was like the perfect combo. And then you start to see, well, man, the leaders of all these subgroups of slaves, sex slaves, were all women. And you're like, wait, how does that happen? How does a woman who is born with probably the greatest kind of innate emotional intelligence out of either one of the species or either one of the genders, but I guess there's multiple.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I'm trying to adapt to that. And but to recognize, man, no, it doesn't matter. I mean, once you're indoctrinated and you can realize the potentiality from a financial well-being, and you've already gone through it yourself, like, and that's what you guys had said. A lot of these people, they move up they climb up the ladder of opportunity, how crazy that is. And then they become the traffickers. So, when you think about it, these women, they become the traffickers too. And how does, the first time you see that, like you're saying this incredible story, like, oh no, that's the trafficker. You have to completely unwind all these perceived biases that already exist.
Oh, absolutely. So, you may have had a dude who started off as a trafficker, and then, he'll have females, but, the leader needs somebody to manage the day-to-day affairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes that can be kind of one of the earlier recruits, known as the bottom. And she will end up doing a lot of the, honestly, even recruiting of new people.
Wow.
Now, there's a big controversy whether or not they are victims or they are criminals. I submit they are both and. They are both victims and they are criminal. Yes, the victimization led them to this point, but they are also, they're adults. They have to be held accountable to some degree because.
Well, now you're getting into the most difficult analysis, I believe. And I'm right now, I'm right knee deep in trying to understand that. I'm reading Jordan Peterson's book called Maps of Meaning, which is a deep introspection into beliefs, right? And how do we distinguish our belief systems from one another, from good versus evil? And when you begin to unpack that, where the lines of what I like to call it is moral ambiguity, those lines become very blurry. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to say, no, it's right and there is wrong. And I remember the first time I tried to wage that argument with my old man. I was a young Buds guy still, and my Superman cape, and we're gonna go stamp out evil. And then you get into the recognition that, hey man, well, there's a lot more to this. That's got to be a challenge, because now all of a sudden your interpretation of good and evil is in limbo as well too.
Oh, absolutely. There is no broad brush with which you can paint.
No.
The lines are too close together, overlapping. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Wow. That for me, I think would be the most difficult, as it, on a different scale, but within that realm of virtue, right? Really understanding our virtues. And I remember being in going up to New York City, and one of my first big calls was on Halloween 97, or was it 98? 97, I think it was. And had a guy go down and worked on him, and he didn't make it, obviously. And I'm looking around, I'm like, well, what do we do now? And they're like, come on, man, let's go get something to eat. I'm hungry. The senior medics, and they're like, I go, what about this guy? And meanwhile, his wife and his kid and his girlfriend are there, and they're freaking out that he just died in front of them. I work this guy, and they're like, come on, man, I'm hungry. Let's go eat. And I was like, that doesn't seem okay to me. And it's like that desensitization, is really a challenge, but it's so prevalent when you're starting, when one, you have to assess this, but two, think about the desensitization of the individual and how significant that might be. You must just get into this and hear the stories about how law enforcement meets these people, and they ask them, well, how could you do this? And they're like, money, man, money.
Well, and that's just, you're talking about an incredible amount of trauma that leads to that, right? Trauma that you, me, and 99% of this planet could never even fathom. Mm-hmm. The absolute base of humanity at that level. And yeah, then you start factoring in all the other things, right? You've got to survive.
Yeah.
You have to do some things to survive, right? Mm-hmm. And those things may be wholly unpalatable, not only to everybody else, but even to yourself, but you have to do it to survive. Mm-hmm. So when you start factoring that in, yeah, it's not clear cut. And at least me, I question it every time. A lot of law enforcement partners we work with, they struggle with it. They're like, God, where do I fall on this spectrum?
Yeah.
Are they purely victims? Do they need to be held account? I mean, our law enforcement partners, they wrestle with it routinely.
I bet.
It's an intractable problem. I don't see a real easy solution to that.
All right, let's dig into the trafficker mindset a little bit. Who is the trafficker? Where are they coming from? How do they discover the business? Give us a little, if you can, give us a little bit of profile.
Okay. So I'll talk about traffickers real quick. The only commonality between victims generally in about 95% of the cases is there's a form of abuse in the background.
Okay.
That's about the only commonality in terms of demographics. And that's only to, like I said, up to 95%.
Mm-hmm.
So the trafficker, soccer mom.
What?
Eighth grade teacher. Oh yeah. Eighth grade teacher was trying to traffic her students. CEOs. We've seen cases where doctors were trafficking people. It's not the organized crime. It's not the Russian mafia. Can it be the gangbanger thug? You bet. But there is no single demographic.
You said that before, and like the first thing that pops into my head anytime, because very few people are able to do that, right? Very few people are able to go to make an emphatic statement in a fashion where it's almost zero differentiation, right? And the only other time I've ever heard people be able to do that is when they ask us who makes it through and who doesn't. Right? We don't know. We don't know why. We don't understand. We understand there's an innate drive in the individual and a willingness to subject themselves to whatever they perceive to be the program, right? But nobody actually can contemplate the magnitude of it. So you're saying that, it really has to do with an opportunity that presents itself. And then whoever sells that opportunity as hey man, this is the easiest money you ever made in your life.
Well, there's that. I mean, and again, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. So for this part, you can take it as a grain of salt or not. But really, I mean, when you start talking about the demographics, there is no demographics because, if you look at the behavior, it is an antisocial behavior, right? So somewhere on that spectrum of, being an antisocial personality disorder all the way up to psychopathy, those behaviors are that. And there's no single demographic that fits those people.
Right.
That is an internal component. So that's where that's why you get the eighth grade teachers, you get the soccer moms, you get the doctors. I mean, a lot of motivational speakers can pop hot on that. I mean,
there's no doubt.
You're very engaging, you've got to sell stuff, it's just the direction in which you choose to utilize those skills to some degree, right?
Oh, bro, we just launched our online training stuff this past summer as a result of COVID. And the whole time I'm building this stuff out, I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, am I a fake? Am I a fraud? Am I a charlatan? Am I a guru? Whatever the hell that is. Right. And I remember being on getting that first course going and doing Zoom calls with everybody on the weekends and hearing people talk about this in a way like, my God, there are so many people that are vulnerable in this world and in this life. And when you can understand how to identify those vulnerabilities and really be able to go after them, man, people don't even know what hit them, especially kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think where I am, at least at this point in my journey, is that I've come to the conclusion that regardless of where you are as a human, you have great capacity, right? And you can either use that for good or evil, and some folks do that back and forth, and some people swing hard one way or the other. In this instance, a lot of these people have chosen to swing hard right, if you will. And,
right. Man, that's a shame. That's really just, it's so sad that it's such it's so prevalent. I mean, it's just sad, but I guess when you think about it and you look at, if you've educated yourself in any capacity and you understand how long slavery has been a component of the human existence, you recognize that there's nothing new about it. In fact, it's probably more lucrative than it's ever been before, but certainly in the past, I mean, look at Alexander the Great. How many slaves did he have fighting for him? I mean, it's part of the human condition. The tough part is that you would figure in 2021, we'd be able to eradicate it in some capacity, but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, on that front, Dave, the fact is, I mean, our modern society, all the tools we have at our disposal, like the internet, I mean, near instant communication across the globe, right? I mean, increase the speed of commerce, all these positive things. But so too, it has created the mechanism by which, you can scale human trafficking.
Wow.
Right? I mean, you can advertise at scale, whereas before you couldn't. And at its root, human trafficking in the sex industry in the U.S. is a volume business.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're doing it. And I'll just tell you, I mean, the benefit of Deliver Fund is we get to utilize those exact same tools they do and the technology, and we get to flip the script and throw it right back at them.
Let's talk about that, because I want people to understand what you guys do. And not in detail how, but just walk us through what Deliver Fund does and how it helps in this fight.
Absolutely. So I'll just start with, a lot of people have problems with the system, and whether you like it or not, the system is the system. And if you want to be effective, you have to work within the system. So to that end, we take a public-private partnership approach. We partner with law enforcement. We don't care about jurisdiction. We don't care local, state, or federal. And essentially what we are is an intelligence arm for them with respect to human trafficking, okay? That is what we do. We only provide intelligence. And we provide it to them along with all the sources so that they can then go in and independently verify and see it, because as a private organization, we can't provide evidence. And the gold standard is a prosecution. An orange jumpsuit behind bars. That's the end state, right? So by doing it this way, we can give a law enforcement officer all this information. But the key is giving them the source of the information so that they can go see it, because now it can be used as evidence in prosecution. And that's the goal. Is we want to make this binary. Data is binary. It is or it is not. This is your phone number. It is not. You were here at this time. You were not. This is your Instagram page. This was your posting. This is you holding all this cash, talking about bitches and hoes and all that, right? So what we'd like to do is get it to a point to where prosecutors don't have to utilize a victim, because most times they want a witness, a victim for the trial. Well, if you get a victim on the stand, a defense attorney is obligated to try to tear down their credibility.
Right.
Well, guess what? That re-traumatizes the victim. That doesn't quite seem right to me.
No, that's sad.
And the sad reality is a lot of them don't make great witnesses because, they have criminal records due to their human trafficking. They don't have jobs. Maybe they have substance abuse issues. So if we can get it to be a completely binary thing where prosecutors just go, oh yeah, hey, here's this, here's this, here's this, and you can map it out on a whiteboard for a jury.
Yeah, that's awesome. Given. You can't beat that.
And that's what we do. That's where we take and help law enforcement, is we're able to do all of that through all of our tools, our technology, and frankly, the experience we have from doing it against very sophisticated organizations overseas.
I got 5 questions in my head at one time. Why can't, let's call it, first, is there real quick, is there any area that's more prone to trafficking than others?
I mean, broadly, what you can say in terms of sex trafficking is, it's a volume business, right? So wherever there's a greater number of potential customers, you'll have a higher ratio as compared to a lower density area. So
okay.
You'll urban centers, great example, right? You're going to see more activity there than you might see in rural Nebraska. That's not to rule out rural Nebraska, because we've seen stuff in rural areas.
Right.
But yeah, so higher population densities are going to have generally a greater problem.
Greater customer base and greater recruiting opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. So if that's the case, then how come in these areas, and I know, this movement towards reevaluating policing, shall we say, or in other terms, defunding the police, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in history, but that we'll get into that maybe another discussion. But how come these organizations can't get the training they need to be able to do this themselves? And if that's the case, how woefully trained are they? How inept are they at being able to do what you guys do?
So part of the reason that they have a hard time getting training is, as you well know, the pool from which to pull for that skill set is extremely small. Coming out of special operations and the intelligence community, that's not a high density type of force. We also have law enforcement officers on us. So we're not just, intelligence. We actually have law enforcement folks on our staff as well who have experience. But the experience base, even in law enforcement, is a very low density force. So because you don't have a very high capacity of experience and expertise, you're just not going to have a broad base. Frankly, some of it also is, people aren't aware, right? If they have never heard about Deliver Fund, they're not going to know what they could potentially have. In terms of how inept or unable folks are, it varies. There's some places, we have a partnership with Houston PD that is phenomenal, and they're really, really good at what they do. Okay?
Good.
Really good. But there's other places that they don't have the experience. They don't have that training. You've got take a kind of a smaller locality sheriff, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to worry about property crime. He has to worry about drugs. He has to worry about, gangs and money laundering and human trafficking and pimping and auto theft and all this stuff. And guess what? He has exactly 4 deputies. Well, how much time are they going to be able to dedicate to each one of those things? And then you have the external influencers, you've got, the rich lady on the corner who's complaining because somebody's parking there. Well, you got to take the deputy and address that because, that particular constituent has power with the policymakers. So
right.
There's all those external influences that tie into it as well.
Wow.
And then there's just a lack of technology. Technology is advanced, but with limited financial resources, most departments don't have the resources to purchase technology.
Wow.
Well, that's where Deliver Fund frankly comes in, bro, is we're able to provide all of that to law enforcement. And there's other companies out there that'll say, oh yeah, we can do this. We have X, Y, or Z. But one of the critical components is they don't have the volume of data that Deliver Fund has. And this is critical because we have a technology called the Platform for the Analysis and Targeting of Human Traffickers.
Wow.
It is actually the largest human curated database of human trafficking information in existence. The key component of that is law enforcement can log in, they can get on there. And so you've got an officer in Washington State that finds John Doe. He puts John Doe's information in there and he gets an alert. Hey, John Doe's already in here. Well, let me click on that and see. And holy smokes, John Doe was being investigated by an officer in Atlanta. And oh, by the way, also by somebody in Houston.
Wow.
And all that data is now in there. And now not only have you mapped out that network, but now all 3 of those officers
are talking.
Can actually connect with one another.
Wow.
We have the jurisdictional silos.
Wow.
So we can actually create a network to fight networks because that's the only way you're going to do this. If you're just going to go in and rescue a victim at a time, you're never going to solve the problem, right? Because
absolutely.
It's a market, an illicit market, but a market. And when you take something off the shelf, you are telling the producer, give me more of that. So you take a victim out, you've created an incentive for a trafficker to recruit another victim to fill that hole, okay? Which is the whole reason why we chose to go after the trafficker, okay? And then more importantly, how do you scale that? Well, you utilize technology. And that's ultimately what we're doing is we're utilizing technology to scale law enforcement's ability to investigate and dismantle illicit human trafficking networks. Not that there is a legitimate or illicit one.
Right. Let me ask you this. Now, a lot of law enforcement guys are listening to my show. Big network of people out there. Is your stuff free? Can they just log in to set up an account with you, or how does that work? How do you build the relationships with these organizations on a municipal level?
Yeah, so we don't charge for our services. When we provide intelligence, we don't charge for it. That's what we're here for. We are here to provide them what they need.
Wow.
So we'll develop all of this. We'll send them a fully blown intelligence package that they can then go ahead and reproduce and they go, okay, yeah, hey, guess what? Hey, prosecutor, here's what I've got. And then it's just up to them to do the stuff that only law enforcement can do.
Right.
Writing of warrants, subpoenas, checking law enforcement.
Bank records, phone data.
Yeah. So it takes their time of investigating that they may have had to do it over 80 hours over the course of a month because they've got all this other stuff down. Guess what? Now it is literally a checklist. Go down, verify, go down, verify, go down, verify. Now you've got it done in 4 hours.
Now, how are you guys spreading the word? Are you going to these conferences? Are you going to, are you reaching out to these organizations, or are you just, how's that working?
So we actually have been training at conferences. Mm-hmm. We offer trainings to law enforcement. I mean, they can go to www.deliverfund.law and they can get on and register for training.
Oh, wow.
It's a law enforcement only website, and they can go there. They'll request the password for access, and then they'll be granted access, and feel free to explore. And then, frankly, just the proof is in the pudding. We're having a lot more law enforcement reach out to us because we've been successful.
Wow.
We've captured all the illicit massage parlors in the United States.
All of them.
All of them. Yep.
Oh my God.
All the ones. Well, let me amend that. All the ones that are advertised. And
right.
Here's another number that'll blow your mind. 10,500.
What?
Illicit massage parlors. Okay.
What?
And the parameters with which we searched that to bring it all in. This was just active and erotic, right? So there's more, but this was just 10,500. There's only 50 states in the union, bro.
That's insane to me.
Yeah.
That's insane that there's that big. It's that big.
And the benefit is because of our technology and because of what we do, we're able to find the connections. We know who owns multiple massage parlors across multiple states. Wow. It's sitting right there in front of us. All we need is, hey, law enforcement wants to do something. Hey, here you go. Sign in and happy hunting. We are there to assist. We will pull the extra strings. We'll get all the other stuff. And it's there.
Wow. Unbelievable, man. The fact that you guys don't have, a representative in every major city in the country is insane to me. I mean, that's just nuts, man.
Yeah.
How are you guys raising money, and how can people contribute and help, and how can they participate in this Herculean effort you guys are undertaking?
So again, right, this is kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? Deliver Fund is doing great work, okay? But the true
God's
heroes,
work, brother. You're doing God's work, man.
Yeah. But the true heroes here are the law enforcement officers that are doing it day in, day out, getting beaten down, getting all the other stuff that they have to do. They're the true heroes. And then there's another set of heroes here, Dave, because Deliver Fund is privately funded. So our donors, honestly, they're the ones that are making all of this possible.
Wow.
Is our donors. If people want to get involved, this is going to sound completely corny. We've all seen those infomercials and all of that. But the God's honest truth is $25 a month, we'll crush this. We'll absolutely crush it.
Wow.
So literally $25 a month on a recurring basis from an individual donor is immeasurable help.
Immeasurable. And I'm assuming that if they get on that payment, it's all tax deduction as well too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're a 501c3. You can look us up on GuideStar.
Mm-hmm.
We are a legitimate nonprofit.
Wow.
So yeah, they are all in fact tax deductible. And this isn't just tax deductible where, hey, yeah, you feel good for doing it. You're actually having a measurable impact when you donate, because those funds go directly towards us helping law enforcement get the bad guys.
Wow.
In terms of sheer volume, this month alone, we're supporting 6 different law enforcement operations in January.
6
different law enforcement operations in January alone. And they're
I can't believe that. That's insane.
And there's some significant events in the very near future with which we are going to be assisting as well.
Wow.
So,
Mike, man. Let me ask you one more question if I can. Obviously, and this was the thing that was very complicated for me, was the recognition that there's no end to people doing evil things. Is that a space for you? And maybe you can, offer some opinions about your colleagues or I should call them the crusaders that you work beside. Is there a debilitating aspect of recognizing that you can do this for the rest of your life and it'll still be there?
Great question. I will tell you that we've done the math, and without getting into specifics, we know that we can easily get rid of all human trafficking by 2050.
By
2050. I'll be lucky if I'm still here around that time. But as an organization, we could easily do it by 2050.
It's possible.
It is possible.
Does it require billions of dollars of funding, a whole new focus from law enforcement, federalized, Homeland and ICE and all these people and a joint, 9/11 task force shit? Does it involve that?
No. It involves, honestly, good people being invested in the mission. And we have that in spades. Like you, I was very fortunate to work in the community in which we work, the SEAL team. I mean, there's a camaraderie and a real focus on the mission that you don't see in a lot of other organizations. And I am beyond fortunate that the team I get to work with now on a daily basis, it is exactly the same. I've never met more dedicated people who have literally, they sacrifice nights and weekends with the family to do this stuff. There's no shortage of sacrifice on the folks that are really hitting it hard every single day.
Wow.
So I'm really fortunate in being able to work with that type of a group again, because it is fairly rare to be able to do that.
You're blessed, man. And I know I'm coming from the bottom of my heart when I just say thank you for what you're doing. Thank you to Nic and Jeremy and everybody that you guys have over there. And thank you to the law enforcement personnel out there that are working with you and making this happen, man, because this is, in my mind, this is the epitome of what we don't stand for in this country, right? Which is equality, and that this is the antithesis of that. This is human bondage and slavery. It's the demoralization of the soul. This is a level of evil that, needs to be eradicated, and you can only stop until it is eradicated. So, for me and hopefully all my listeners, man, just thank you, Mike, so much for what you do and how you do it, man.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. I really do. But I'll be honest, I'm really incredibly grateful to you for the opportunity. Okay. I'm also incredibly grateful for your listeners who choose to engage in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, $25 a month goes a long way. Spreading the word is incredibly huge. A lot of people don't recognize it for what it is.
No. It's not going to affect me. I live in this place. There's no trafficking on my block. There's none in my town. And if it is, it's some seedy organization. It's criminals, and they ignore it, man.
It's easy to hide, right?
Yeah.
But I'll give a couple of resources. Go to deliverfund.org if you're interested in learning more about the organization or becoming a partner through funding. Deliverfund.org is that. If you're law enforcement, go to deliverfund.law. That is our website specifically for our law enforcement brothers and sisters. And we'll be happy to engage and see what we can do to support. I think I would, one final statement I would close with is, you may choose to look away, but you can never again say you did not know.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen. Well, Mike, brother, God bless you. God bless all of you guys at Deliver Fund. And man, if anything happens in the future, or you want to come back on, or maybe I can get Jeremy next time and have him tell his story, and just, I'll get everybody in the organization to tell their story. Anything I can do to help you guys, I just feel, I feel compelled, and I just appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. And again, I think that'd be awesome. We ought to get a multiple group.
Now you're talking.
Do a round table, right?
Done, man.
Maybe do it with a little whiskey and vodka or something.
Oh, now we're talking. Now that's well. Last time I did that, I did it with Sean Ryan, Mike Ritlin, and Rob O'Neill, and we got into some bizarre conversations thanks to Rit. But I'm sure ours would be a little bit more focused and intellectual. So that's a deal.
Awesome, brother. Well, I look forward to it. And hey, thanks again. I will just say that, yeah, it's an honor. So
thank you, brother. God bless.
Thanks, Dave.
Wow. I'll tell you what, everybody, man. It's difficult to wrap your mind around the fact that every 2.5 hours, a child is taken by human traffickers. 100,000 to 150,000 victims are held as commercial sex slaves in the U.S. right now. And the one that just kills me is that every trafficked child is purchased for sex 5.4 times a day. These stats are haunting. Just let those statistics sink in. Really. Let them sink in. And then tonight, when you're around your family members, or when you're engaging with loved ones and you're looking at your children, man, let that sink in. Let those numbers sink in. Because I certainly do with my 4 daughters. The greatest fear I have of the evil that is permeating this world, that's out there lurking in front of our eyes, in the shadows, and everywhere in between. Man, Mike, you are, it just makes me so proud that there are men like you and Nick and Jeremy that are out there doing the job that you're doing. I mean, think about it. This is every day. The rest of us, we wake up and we go about our lives, right? We go about our lives selling our insurance. We go about our lives giving our talks. We go about our lives, whatever it may be, making coffee. We go about our lives working for tech companies. We go about our lives screaming at each other on Facebook over political nonsense. We go about our lives and we worry about what car we drive. We go about our lives and we worry about where we're going on vacation next month. What do you think the families of these trafficked human beings are going through? What do you think the mothers and the fathers are feeling? Or worse yet, what do you think these these slaves that are being raped 5 times a day feel? All ages. What kind of fear do you think they live in? What kind of trauma is being inflicted on them that they will never, ever be able to erase from their psyche for the rest of their life? It becomes their human condition. It is the defining characteristic of their human condition. The way they were treated, the way they were abused, the way they were abducted. There is nothing more despicable on this planet than the trafficking of other human beings, man. Please, please do Mike a favor. Go to the Deliver Fund. Go to deliverfund.org and donate. Donate some money. Give up your frappa cappuccino for a month or 2 months. Give up, I don't know, buying yourself a new pair, a new Gucci purse. Give up getting yourself, I don't know, something, and give that money to the Deliver Fund. These people, they care. And they're working, they are working their butts off to save lives every day, man. God bless you all. I just can't imagine, man. Just thank you so much, Mike, for coming on this show. It's such an honor and a privilege to have had you on. And I certainly hope that we can continue helping you at Team Froglogic. We can continue promoting what it is you're doing. We can continue raising the alarms of the magnitude of this issue. Because we believe that your mission in life is the most honorable mission that we know of. And we fully support you and all of those who do it. And God bless all the victims, man. Wow. Just blown away by this, man. Every time I just process this, it's just so heavy for me, man. God bless you guys. Whew. I don't even know what to do, man. I want to go on and, geez. I got to mention my sponsor. I know it doesn't seem like an appropriate time to do it, but, it's just, I'm so privileged and blessed to be working with Mymedicalimages Com. If you or your loved ones who have been going through hell with whatever medical emergencies you have, and one of the most difficult aspects of that is trying to get your images on CD-ROM, 25, 35-year-old technology. And you got to get it from one doc or one x-ray place and take it to another, or get your MRI or your mammogram, and you got to request this thing and take it over here. And next thing you know, you got this big CD case of CDs. Well, our mission is to help you, is to put the power back in the palm of your hand, in the same place that all of your most important family images are. All your photos are in the palm of your hand. They're in the cloud. We want to do that with the most important medical images for you. We want to give you a space where you have the ability to view, share, and manage a lifetime of medical images with your family members, all in one place. So you don't have to go through the craziness of that antiquated technology. And trust me when I say we are HIPAA compliant. Absolutely HIPAA compliant. So please head over to My Medical Images, sign up for a 1-year free subscription. If you use the promo code Froglogic, this is going to be available till June 1st. It's normally $29.95 for a year subscription, all your family, all that. And just get on there and upload all your images. If you can't, we'll be happy. Send them to us. And pretty soon we're going to announce a big, huge deal that's coming down the pike. And you're going to be able to do it in a much easier way if you're like me and you have one external hard drive out there. I know none of my new commuters have hard drives. That's what I'm saying. This technology's gone. So we're here to help you make your life easier by putting the most important medical images back in the palm of your hand. Go over when you sign up, 1 year free subscription. Use promo code Froglogic, and regain power of your medical images. All right. Also, if you want to help us out at Team Froglogic, go visit the website, teamfroglogic.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Each show, blog posts are in there. We're going to start getting that thing ramped up again. We've got some online courses we're going to be issuing here coming the end of the month and beginning of mid-March, too. A new course, Forging Self-Confidence. The next course we're going to offer is teaching people to embrace their fear. If you want to know more about our online training, head over to froglogicinstitute.com. And you'll be able to say how we offer it and how it goes down. Man, this training will help you out immensely, especially if you're worn out for the last year of fear just pulsing through your brain with seeming like a never-ending sequence. So go check us out at teamfroglogic.com or froglogicinstitute.com. Again, I'm still not really on any social media. I'm trying to explore. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm going to start posting more on LinkedIn here. But that's about it. Can't support anybody that doesn't support free speech. Man, thank you, everybody. Thank you for continuing to listen. I really appreciate your support and your effort and the great feedback I get online or in emails. I just can't tell you. It keeps me going. I really appreciate it. I hope these shows are helping you understand your human condition, the human condition within you. I hope they're helping you learn to embrace fear, forge self-confidence, live a team life, and ultimately to discover the purpose that has the most meaning in your life. So thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus Christ. Thank you, Jonna, my kids. Thank you, my family members. Thank you, my friends. Thanks, Mymedicalimages, for supporting me. But most importantly, I want to thank Mike. I want to thank everybody at the Liver Fund for doing what you're doing. And I want to thank all the survivors of human trafficking. I want to just say God loves you. We're praying for you and your recovery. And these people are not going to stop until they find you. Nobody is. And we're going to try and get more people on board with this effort because this has got to stop. We've got to stop evil in its tracks. All right. Thank you, everybody. Godspeed. Out.